So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome today to a conversation about in-building wireless and specifically the system of vendors, the ecosystem of vendors required to build and deploy and support a successful in-building wireless system. My name is Iain Gillott from IGR, and this interview we're conducting today is part of a report we're doing with Connected Real Estate magazine. And the report will be out in a month or so, but this interview is being conducted today with Ken Sandfeld, who is president of SOLiD Americas. So without further ado, Ken, welcome today, and if you can start by saying who you are, what you do, and what SOLiD does.
Thank you, Ian. It's a pleasure. SOLiD is a manufacturer of in-building coverage solutions as well as network solutions, including next generation WDM optics, IoT products, and other 5G related solutions. So we're the manufacturer of infrastructure is what we do.
Okay, great. So let's start out the conversation with, I said, in-building wireless. Obviously, there's lots of different types of buildings, from stadiums to manufacturing to warehousing, offices, all the way down to homes and apartment buildings. So when you look at the in-building wireless opportunity from the SOLiD perspective, how do you look at the opportunity? What part of the market do you look at, and how do you view the overall opportunity out there?
Absolutely. And so, you know, the way I'm looking at it going forward, the next 5 to 10 years even, it's almost borderline greenfield. And I know you're saying, Ken, you know, in-building DAS has been around for a long time. How can it be greenfield? Well, if you remove the larger projects, the ones that are typically funded today, large projects, buildings, venues, the ones that we're mostly doing today, you basically, I believe you have almost a greenfield market. And then when you combine the new technologies, you know, 5G, IoT, CBRS, are all coming together to make the in-building market even much stronger than it is today. Dare I say that buildings, I don't know if buildings are going to be smarter in the future, but they're going to certainly be connected inside out, that's for sure. And I think that's the next phase that we're going to be going into, and why I feel so positive about the long-term growths of the in-building space. So you've heard us talk about the middle prize. You know, I think that, you know, everyone's trying to make that a reality, and it just hasn't yet, but it's very, very close now to getting there.
So it's interesting what you say about it being greenfield, because, you know, we have numbers for the number of deployments, and it is single-digit percentages of buildings that have an in-building wireless solution in them. And as you said, most of them are the big stadiums, the big convention centers, large hotels, etc. So when you say middle price, how small a building would you go down to? What's a typical, what would you say is the typical size of target for you?
Well, I tend to look at it more of from a footprint perspective. So if you have a small office or a small space that you can cover with 1 or 2 RF radiating sources, you know, then you're probably looking at small cell or other types of solutions that, you know, in the future that will be used to cover a smaller space. When you get to the point where you need infrastructure, you know, a lot more cabling and devices to cover a much larger area, now you're talking about a more sophisticated solution, whether it's DAS or distributed small cell type of solution, you're going to need something a little bit more robust and scalable than you would if you just put 1 or 2 devices in a building. So to me, it's all about that. It's also all about what, you know, if you're solving for a solution where the carriers don't have a solution, or they don't want to fund the solution, right? Where the enterprise essentially has to help themselves. So I don't like to classify it as from a size perspective, because you might have a 100,000 square foot building that isn't necessarily a candidate for a DAS, yet it's the perfect candidate for a DAS because the enterprise needs to solve their for a solution, and they need something scalable and robust. And, you know, with IoT and CBRS and all these other things coming up, those things are going to drive these customers to fund their own infrastructure and not just rely on an operator to come in with some kind of device that they're going to put in the building. So to me, it's not just a size thing, it's a qualification thing as well. But in general, it's, anything over hundreds of thousands of square feet typically, right, is what we've been doing.
Okay, good. So let's talk about the solution you guys offer, and then I want to talk a little bit further about the ecosystem where you fit in with the other vendors. But what does SOLiD bring specifically to the building? We're going to put an in-building wireless solution. Obviously, there's lots of components to that. So I have a big box that arrives. It says SOLiD on it. I open it up. What do I get inside? What do you provide?
Sure. Well, obviously we provide equipment and we provide support. We'll talk about the ecosystem partners later, like you said. Ultimately, we're going to provide an infrastructure network solution, right? So the customer is going to find boxes, rack mount boxes, remotes that will start to resemble more access point type of solutions, which is what people are used to today when they see something hanging on the ceiling. In 2019, Genesis will be officially rolling out. And so those devices are more along the lines of an infrastructure solution and less like a coax network solution. It's not necessarily going to mean that the coax solution is going to go away. Matter of fact, they're absolutely not. It just means that the newer types of infrastructure, structured cabling solutions will start to fill in the gaps where the other solutions couldn't. So SOLiD manufactures those parts, we support them, we kit them, and we work with our partners to make sure that they are successfully implemented in the market.
Okay, right. So obviously we're talking about infrastructure today and the ecosystem. It takes a lot of different components here and a lot of different vendors to bring, vendors to bring a solution together. So who do you work with? What types of companies does SOLiD work with to get the solution in place? If you take it from planning all the way through to support, you mentioned. I assume you yourself is not running around a building, putting in wiring and plugging things in. So somebody must be doing that. So what types of companies do you work with?
Yeah, well, with a 20-year pedigree, we've built a very long list of partnerships out in the market as part of the ecosystem. And our partners have come to rely on us for our reliability of our solutions and the end-to-end support that we provide. Ultimately, we work with the value-added resellers, third-party owners, distributors, all of which whom have go-to-market strategies on how to solve for these buildings, right? And without them, we wouldn't be able to go to market and deliver everything that we do. We need those partners to they're the ones out surveying these buildings. They're the ones funding the buildings. They're the ones getting all the different additional parts and cabling and pieces together for our customers and our partners, right? So without them, the market, wouldn't exist and the ecosystem isn't complete. So, we focus on the technology bits that help them get the job done more efficiently, reliably, and with the right support and customer service that people expect.
Okay, so then, so in the design phase, then you've got the integrators there, the ISVs there, designing a system. If they've got something kind of a little quirky, a little unusual, I assume they can come to you, say, look, we're putting in this, how would we solve for this, this, and this? So you get the technical support from your end as well?
Absolutely. So it's both pre-sales and post-sales. From a pre-sales perspective, we're reviewing designs, making sure things are optimal. We're basically the second set of eyes. And then from a post-support perspective, we're obviously there to support if anything goes wrong with the products. We're also there to support any other technical issues, integrating operators, integrating different signal sources and new technologies. We're there to support those efforts as well. And we're really, cradle to grave support, and that's what our responsibility is to our partners.
So you mentioned CBRS a couple of times. Obviously, the 3.5 gig band we've got in the US. Actually, it's a global band, but yep. Here we've called it CBRS. And we've got some light licensing, I think is the term that we're going to use. You've obviously got a lot of systems out there already that I imagine people are going to be looking to retrofit in CBRS within that or add in a new system. So at that point, the ISVs, I assume, would be going out there, do the planning, then coming back to you to do that, provide the equipment for that integration. Do you see that, is that as big opportunity as you see, or?
It's a wonderful opportunity. CBRS brings a wonderful opportunity. Before I answer the rest of that, I want to point out that that SOLiD is already deploying 3.5 gigahertz systems in other parts of the world where 3.5 is considered 5G. So, for example, in South Korea, they're already deploying 3.5 gig 5G, and we're already deploying solutions. And throughout 2019, we'll be deploying thousands of systems throughout the year. These will be the same basic technology that we're going to be deploying CBRS on in the US. To answer your question regarding the existing systems, all of our alliance systems will be upgradable and able to be enhanced to support CBRS as well as other 5G band capabilities. So it's really important that everything we deployed and all the new products are all compatible with these new bands. They're really important to the industry's success as well as our customers' requirements.
Right. It's interesting what you say about the global opportunity or the global solution for 3.5 gigahertz, because as we've been deploying or developing the CBRS plans, we've also, of course, as an industry, been moving towards 5G, and CBRS was designated as LTE. Now, of course, we're talking 5G, but really it's just the next evolution in the standards. And I think 3.5 gigahertz is one of the only two common bands around the world that overlaps that's been designated for 5G. So I think you're right, the first installations we have in the US are going to be, they'll get designated 5G, and there's no reason they couldn't be 5G equipment. It's just a matter of timing. If we put CBRS in 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been LTE, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, you mentioned how SOLiD differentiates itself in the space, and that's one of the ways we do, right? We're already deploying thousands of 5G systems in South Korea, and we take that knowledge and those things we learned, deploying the new 5G NR radios on our systems. We take everything we learn and we bring that to the global market, and of course the Americas market. And so, that's one of the things that we bring to our customers here in the U.S. is that we have the pedigree because we typically do it first elsewhere, and then we bring it to the U.S. market and other markets. So that's one of the strengths that we have and have been relying on for over 20 years.
Good. Okay, so a couple more questions. What defines a successful in-building wireless project for you? You've helped the vendors, ISVs, put a solution in, you've got the customer. At the end of the day, you sit back and say, that was a good project. That was great. What does that building look like? What does that installation look like? What's the user experience like for that success?
Sure. Well, I think if I speak for my partners and the people that are in the buildings after the system is done, that some of the most important things are that there's multiple operators on a DAS. That's been kind of one of the biggest problems in our industry, is that we have so many systems out there with one operator on them, and that to me is a fail, and I don't consider that a success. It may be financially work out okay, but ultimately it doesn't help the people in the building that walk in and aren't one of those operators that is on the system. So number of operators on the system, I think, is something that the industry needs to solve for. We need all operators on every system. I know that's a big goal, but to me, that's success. The other thing is the time to first call. So from the time that the infrastructure is turned on and the time that the first call or data session is made, that to me, the time it takes that to happen, obviously, I want to measure it in months and not over a year, and that's another thing that the industry is really trying to solve for. And right now it's a challenge. Maybe on small systems where it's a small cell, things like that, it's easier to navigate the whole thing. But you get a little bit bigger and you need to request bigger signal sources and whatnot, and the time span can easily stretch over a year. And that's a problem, and to me, how fast that takes place, it makes it a success. So if you can measure it in months, I consider it a success. The other thing I think that's really important ultimately is scalability. Rarely does a system ever get deployed and then stay static. These systems constantly are being enhanced and added to. And to me, the ease of which these systems can scale to support the new technologies is a success. And we count on our modularity and our capabilities to be able to enhance systems that people deploy, and into the years. And so those are some things. The only final thing I think would see be a success if there's no out-of-box failures. Obviously, that's a goal, and that's something we typically achieve out in the market. We have a very reliable product. So to me, those are how we measure success, and I think our partners measure success. And those are areas I think the industry needs to focus on.
Right. So when you say the timing issue, ideally in months from concept to first call, not years. Is there a particular stumbling block you're seeing, or does it just depend on the situation, the building, the customer, the signal source? Is there anything you can point to and say we really need to focus on this as an industry?
I think the availability and the process it takes to get signal sources is still too long. I realize that, the operators have, their process and things they got to do, but ultimately access and speed to that, even when the customers are willing to fund them, it's sometimes, magic happens and it all happens very quickly. But for the most part, what I'm hearing out in the industry over and over and over is that process it just takes way too long. And the stumbling block is, these are large organizations that are processing these requests, and there's so many of them, right? So my recommendation is to essentially, it's kind of like the cable TV days, where in the beginning you had to wait for the provider to get you the equipment. And then later you were able to go to Best Buy and buy it off the shelf and plug it in and turn it on. I know it won't be quite that simple, but that should be the goal. It should be as simple as, hey, SOLiD, or hey, my provider, my partner, I need you to get this up in the air in 2 months. And oh, by the way, go and buy that signal source. We like that one, buy that one, and turn it on, right? Now, obviously the big gotcha is backhaul. Who's going to supply and fund that backhaul? And that's something that has to be decided. But worst comes to worst, it should be able to be provided by the enterprise as well. If they want to pay for it and they have a need or an application, they should be able to do that. And right now, that typically slows things down.
Yeah. And of course, we're in the situation now as we enter 2019. We've got one of the big operators offering buyouts for retirees and restructuring. We've got two of the big operators going through the merger process. So you say these are big organizations. They're changing organizations as well, which is going to amplify the problem in the short term, I think, rather than in the long term, it could get better. But in the short term, it's probably going to be more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I actually think, look, these are cycles that our industry goes into, and it's been through multiple times. It's nothing new. I think what we're seeing is service providers are focusing on what they do, which is provide service. And they don't want to necessarily be in the business of putting up every box in every building and every pole. They want to supply service. And I think it provides an opportunity for the partners in the ecosystem that I suggested to become stronger and to provide those services, whether they provide those services to the enterprise or whether they supply those services to the operator. I believe that ecosystem is going to grow even stronger. And at some point, I believe that the financial folks of the operators are going to say, why can't we make it faster to allow the enterprise to enable itself so that we can sell services to them? And so I think that's where it's really going to change, right? If their economic model actually improves by allowing the enterprise to gain access quicker to their core network and be able to, well, not access to their core network, but essentially turn on their services quicker. I believe when the operator can click a button on a screen and say, oh yeah, we want to supply service to that building and enable our customers, that's really what they're looking for.
Okay, so last question. You and I have been on many panels over the years, and I always ask this question last. And 18 was a big year for you. You moved headquarters to Richardson, right? Texas?
To Plano, Texas.
Plano. And I know you've got a big distribution center there and the new offices. So I think if I'd asked you this question last year, you would have hinted on some of those things. You also moved house last year as well. So
I did. I'm a Texan.
So the question is, what keeps you awake at night from an industry perspective? And let's keep it obviously the in-building wireless discussion we have, but what is it as an industry you think that we're going to have to address here? And let's say in 2019, that if we don't address it in a couple of years' time, it's going to come back and really hurt us. We're like, darn it, we should have done that in 19. What would you point to?
Well, I think there's a couple things. First of all, I think we need to stop the hype versus reality along new standards. And I'm talking about 5G. I hate to even say it, right? But the hype versus reality really hurts our industry. It creates false senses of what things are. And it creates a lot of bad situations where customers are buying into things that aren't even real and aren't even fully vetted out in the market. And that's not right. And so I hope that the industry kind of figures out the terms we want to use so that we all working on the same pulling on the same rope in our industry. So that's definitely something that I think we need to be recognized and correct at these events we talk about, right? We can't continue to foster the wrong impression of what these technologies are going to do for people, right? And that's we all like to think though we can walk on water after it's all done, but it's not going to happen, right? The other thing we have to recognize, and I think it's really set in place with 4G LTE, was its densification, right? I mean, densification to a level we've never seen. 5G is not attainable. The goals of 5G are not attainable without a massive densification in a fiber network, and fiber to the edge is going to be key. And you can't do millimeter wave without fiber to the edge because you got to get closer. You can't achieve all the latencies and the other things. So I believe that reality is something that I think we have to continue to remember. It's a physics formula. It's really what it is. It continues to be a physics formula, and the physics formula gets even more stronger with 5G and the requirements around it. So, but that's what makes it an opportunity, right? I think a few years ago when small cells hit the scene, everyone had a false sense of reality of what it was going to really solve, and now we know differently. So those are some of the things, my thoughts on those subjects.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the 5G, a lot of people forget that 4G LTE has been around for a long time, and actually it's going to dominate the users. The user experience and certainly the number of people in the world using LTEs, it doesn't get surpassed by 5G until well into the next decade. Yeah. And 5G is going to be a long, long journey. It's a 10-year journey. And yet, if you read a lot of the things that are out there, you believe that you can walk down the street today and buy a phone and it'll work immediately. And of course, we're a long, long, long way from that. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I am happy. I am happy to see going into this new year that the number of approved sites in cities across the country for small cells are skyrocketing. Just yesterday, I heard in Dallas alone, there's over 800 sites that are going through process, and of those 800, almost 600 have already been approved and are being built. So, I mean, that's the kind of densification that we're looking for from an outdoor perspective. Now imagine that same thing has to happen inside the building, because those small cells are not going to cover inside the building. So that is exactly, we overcame a lot of the hurdles outside, getting through permitting, regulation, and all those different things. We kind of smoothed it out. Cities want this, they want to get things going. So now from an in-building perspective, we got to take care of that challenge. And it's not going to happen by itself, that's for sure.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much. Good conversation. Thanks for talking today. Again, for the audience, we've been talking with Ken Sandfeld in Plano, Texas, and as the president of SOLiD America. So, Ken, thanks very much.
Thanks, Iain. I appreciate it. Have a great day, and thanks for the time today.
Great. Thank you.